Thank you, sir. Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Welcome, everyone, to the January 25th, 2021 meeting of the Lawrence Douglas County Metropolitan Planning Commission. It's the first meeting of this calendar year. So thank you to those who have made it. It looks like a small group tonight. And it's just sad for the other people because it's going to be a great topic. So tonight is primarily a study session, but it is a public meeting. So I'm going to hand it over to Kyle Kobe, and he can kind of explain the ground rules during the Zoom call.
Thank you very much. My name is Kyle Kobe. I'll be facilitating the Zoom video portion of the meeting. Participating via remote video is Becky Pepper, Planning Manager. We will work alongside the Planning Commission Vice Chair, who's on remote video, to facilitate the meeting proceedings. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast live on the city's YouTube channel and public access cable channel 25. During the meeting, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found in the lower left-hand corner of the Zoom menu next to the video icon. When you are muted, a red line will appear over the icon. This will make it easier for everyone to hear the meeting. Just remember to unmute if and when you want to speak. If you are participating by phone, you can enter *6 to mute and unmute your phone. Somewhere on your Zoom screen, you will also see a choice to toggle between speaker and gallery view. Speaker view shows the active speaker. Gallery view tiles all of the meeting participants. Commissioners, you must state your name and title each time you speak. Members of city staff must also state their name and title each time they speak. And I'd also ask that members of the public identify themselves each time before they speak to ensure that everyone's able to follow along. When public comment is sought, individuals participating via Zoom should use the Raise Your Hand feature. Windows and Mac users can access this feature through the Participants button at the bottom of their screen. Android and iPhone users can access this feature through the More button located at the bottom right corner of their screen. For those calling in by phone, you may dial *9. Individuals will be called upon by name in the order they appear on the meeting host screen. When you are called on, please unmute your listening device and state your name before speaking. The chair will then call for in-person public comment for those who are physically present. Staff will direct you to the podium to speak while following social distancing and safety protocols. I want to again remind everyone to please mute yourself when you're not speaking, and I'll now turn the meeting back over to the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Kyle. Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. So tonight, like I said, the first item on our agenda is our study session. And these Monday meetings are going to be set up, I think, for the most of, or at least they've been calendared out a good ways to until we're clear of the pandemic and can meet together as our sort of typical mid-month meetings. And I think we'll probably go over that calendar perhaps on Wednesday, but the first one up, the one that we have tonight, is the life cycle of a planning commission submittal. This is a great topic. It's kind of a good one, I feel like, to start the calendar year. And so we have presenting tonight Denny and Luke, and I'd love to turn it over to you guys, and I'm sure we're all curious to hear all about this.
Go ahead and turn back to Becky.
Luke Mortensen, Planning and Development Services. I think our planning manager, Becky Pepper, is going to say a few words pretty quickly.
Very
Becky
good.
Becky Pepper, Planning Manager. Thank you very much. I'll make this brief because I want us to get to this presentation. But basically, just to echo what the Vice Chair said, we are, for the time being, while we're all kind of participating in these meetings via Zoom, we're going to be holding our mid-month meetings at your regularly scheduled Monday Planning Commission meeting. With the exception of next month, I think that we will cancel the February Monday Planning Commission meeting because we will have the Wednesday Planning Commission meeting for public hearing items, and then that Friday, February 26th, will be the Planning Commission orientation, and I think we'll discuss that further on Wednesday's agenda. But I just wanted to make you aware of that. And so we're planning on these mid-month meetings occurring on Monday, maybe through July, but really this is kind of a period of flexibility where just depending on if we can get back into the room sooner or if it's later, there may be some changes in that calendar as we start to learn more there. But I really just wanted to give you that update on that mid-month. What I can say is that, again, February is canceled, and then I think we're planning a joint meeting with the Multimodal Transportation Commission in March at that Monday meeting. So with that, I will turn it over to our presenters this evening.
Thank you, Becky. I'm Denny Ewart, Administrative Support with Planning and Development Services Office. We are going to be screen sharing this evening. Can you hear me okay? Perfect. And can everybody see the presentation okay? Great. Good evening, Commissioners. Luke Mortensen and I will be presenting to you the life cycle of Planning Commission submittals. The first stage in a Planning Commission agenda item is a pre-application meeting with the applicant at least 7 days prior to an application submittal. This meeting can include planning and development services. Sorry, get to the next screen here. This meeting can include planning and development services, municipal services and operations, fire prevention, the city manager's office, Douglas County staff, and KDOT as needed to discuss their project. During the meeting, planning staff assists the applicant in determining the submittal requirements and which applications and information should be provided, such as drawings, traffic impact study, drainage study, market study, downstream sanitary sewer analysis, and other data as necessary to demonstrate that the proposed project will meet city code and general conformance with the comprehensive plan. Potential variances or roadblocks are also outlined in the pre-application meeting. Once a complete application is submitted to the Planning and Development Services Office, it is processed and logged into the city's internal programs and distributed to reviewers for comments. Internal city reviewers can include planning, transportation planning, historic resources, building safety, municipal services and operations, fire, police, parks and recreation, as well as external reviewers such as AT&T, Black Hills, Evergy, Midco, KDOT, the Post Office, County Health Department, County Register of Deeds, County Zoning and Codes, County Engineer, and townships. Review comments are collected by the planner assigned to the project, and a review comment letter is sent to the applicant outlining the comments received and what changes or additional information may be needed from the applicant. This process is repeated as needed to review revisions and additional documents provided by the applicant during this process. Multiple rounds of review are sometimes required, and the length of review time reduces as the subject matter narrows. As the review process continues, the applicant may work more closely with one reviewer than others. The planner manages an application through the review process and through necessary boards and commissions for Planning Commission approvals, City and County Commission approvals, Board of Zoning Appeals variances, and Historic Resources Commission design reviews. Planning Commission applications follow the timeline on the meeting calendar. For example, the agenda item scheduled for Wednesday's Planning Commission meeting had a submittal deadline of November 23rd, and if Planning Commission makes a recommendation, the item will move on to either County Commission on February 17th or City Commission on March 2nd. After an application has worked its way through the review process, planners prepare a staff report for Planning Director approval. Projects are scheduled to be heard by Planning Commission approximately 9 weeks after they are submitted. As required by code, notice requirements are completed at least 20 days prior to Planning Commission. A legal notice is published in the newspaper. Letters are mailed to property owners within 400 feet inside the city and half-mile outside city limits, as well as notification to neighborhood associations, and public notice signs are posted at the site. Planners field inquiries from the public throughout the entire process. The Planning Commission agenda packet is managed using a web-based program, iCompass. Planners enter their staff reports and attachments into the program approximately a week prior to the packet being posted to allow time for additional review by the planning manager and planning director. The Planning Commission agenda packet is posted at least 5 days prior to your meeting, and notification of the packet posting, as well as any updates, is emailed using a distribution list of approximately 700 subscribers. Each application requires a level of approval which can be administrative or approved by Planning Commission, City Commission, or County Commission. After Planning Commission provides a recommendation to the governing body, agenda items move on to City or County Commission for approval. Public hearing items such as rezonings and special use permits have a 14-day protest period before being forwarded to the governing body. Planners provide updates and outcomes to the applicant throughout this entire process. Once approved by the governing body and conditions of approval have been met, documents are released for building permits and/or recorded at the Register of Deeds office. Materials, processes, actions, and outcomes of each case are documented in multiple locations. And Luke is going to provide you with an example.
Good evening, Commissioners. Luke Mortensen, planner with the Planning and Development Services Department. I'd like to first thank Denny for this first portion of tonight's presentation, and as well for what she and our other admin folks do for us planners every single day. Every step and process that Denny just mentioned and what I'll talk a little bit about requires an admin's touch, and they really work hard to keep us on track. And as much as Jeff would have you believe he has the hardest job, I actually think they do. So we are very appreciative of them. So to make the processes that Denny just discussed a little bit more clear and a little bit more concrete, I've selected a subject property that has a number of planning processes taken place on it in the recent past. 508 Michigan Street, it's an existing residential and commercial lawn care provider. It sits on the east side of Michigan Street between 5th and 6th Streets near the former Anderson Reynolds building. Since about 2017, the property has had a number of planning processes take place on it to get it to a point where it can be used as Green Touch, that's the name of the business, and they fall underneath our code's construction, sales, and services use. So you can see beginning in 2017 with the rezoning and the comprehensive plan amendment all the way to 2019, couple different major planning processes in there. So you'll see on this list of those processes that some of them require Planning Commission approval or a Planning Commission recommendation, while others are handled totally administratively. Both the rezoning and the comprehensive plan amendment required Planning Commission consideration. In this instance, the minor subdivision replat required a Planning Commission variance approval. And the site plan was administrative. So this is all information I'm sure you're aware of at this point, but it's always good to review. So Denny explained, slide please, Denny. So this is just a little bit more detail about that property, 508 Michigan Street. On the left is the original plat document, and then on the right is kind of the final document where we ended up after these processes. So slide please. Okay. So Denny explained about the pre-application meetings and what takes place at those. Planners work to flesh out what the potential applicant really wants. Sometimes applicants aren't fully aware of their desired outcome, and so it's our job to walk them through the code so that everybody in the room is on the same page. Determining what it is they want exactly will guide the processes that we need to work on, and it will inform staff's next steps. So I'm going to use minor subdivision 19-00217 that was on the previous slide as an example to explain what happens before, during, and after a Planning Commission item is considered. So in early April of 2019, staff scheduled a pre-application meeting with this specific applicant and his design professionals. That included an engineer and some design architecture folks. So even prior to this pre-application meeting, staff had used what are called public inquiries. So that's when somebody makes a phone call and has a question, and it's those first phone calls. Staff uses those earliest contacts to discuss with the applicant what other reviewers need to be in the room for that initial pre-application meeting. So we want our applications and our applicants to have the most knowledge possible before they even submit anything. So that they can be the most accurate upon submittal and be the most efficient for everybody. So at that pre-application meeting, the planner discussed the minor subdivision process to combine those existing platted lots. That's what you saw on the left hand on the previous screen. And the major site planning process to construct the business's proposed equipment storage structure, as well as the new use that new construction sales and services use. So in this instance, both the minor subdivision and the site plan required variances. Planning staff had to instruct and inform on the different types of variances and the different bodies that consider them. As you're aware, Planning Commission does consider some variances, but not all of them. So beyond variances, we discuss anything else that may come up. For example, if the site were in the regulatory floodplain, we would discuss the floodplain development permits. If the site were located in a locally listed historic environs, we would discuss the HRC review process. Pre-application meetings are also the best time for our non-planning reviewers to speak directly with the applicant and, more importantly, the applicant's design professionals. So it's the opportunity for our municipal services and operations department engineers and our fire safety reviewers and our building safety folks to speak directly with that architect, engineer, design professional. So it's to the benefit of everybody that we have the most relevant, knowledgeable folks in the room as possible. You may find it hard to believe, but planners do not have the answer to everything. We're not experts, even though we sometimes think we're pretty close to it. So you'll see that the applicant, on the dates, you'll see that the applicant took the pre-application meeting notes that we provided and submitted formal applications later that month. So by the end of April, staff had completed its first round of reviews that Denny was speaking about. So not only do planners complete their own review, but they also collect and distribute the comments for all reviewers. And so this includes, but is not limited to, that same list that Denny talked about. Our MSO folks, our Parks and Rec folks, KDOT, Midco, all those utility companies, and more. So this is a group of folks that are both internal and external to the city. I like to think that this is where planners, we have to function as really high-level communicators. We become the link between this large group of reviewers and the applicant and their design folks. And so it's really important that information flows between these different groups and that staff works really hard to be good stewards of everyone's time and resources, because we all know how valuable those are right now. So depending on the applicant's response to the reviewer's comments, there may be additional rounds of review. Usually there's at least one additional round for some elements of an application. And as Denny mentioned, they become more tightly focused on certain elements and they begin to move quicker, a matter of days or a day as communication becomes, quicker. Slide, please. So now we're getting to the point where you all, as the Planning Commission, would first get involved with a planning item, even though it may very well be well on its way through the department at this time. So from the first pre-application meeting in our example on Michigan Street, staff had identified that due to the fact that this is an infill lot in development on an existing central city lot, a variance from the subdivision regulations for lot width and lot frontage would be required. So staff had communicated that very early in the process. The applicant was able to prepare his variance request, and we could make a recommendation for you all as the Planning Commission to consider. So you'll see at the bottom, Planning Commission approved this variance request, and then staff takes that, and even before it comes to you all, we work really hard to place it on the appropriate agendas so that no part of the remaining review processes get held up by an agenda. Because while this is happening, while we see you for one night, the process is still moving before and after kind of all around us. So once the Planning Commission considers a variance request, like I said, the gears keep turning. In this instance, the MSO department had asked that the applicant dedicate a utility easement on the minor subdivision drawing to encase in a sewer that was already on that property. Additionally, that went to City Commission for them to accept, not a Planning Commission action. Additionally, the applicant requested a number of variances from the Board of Zoning Appeals. Those were necessary for site plan approval. And then finally, staff had to coordinate a use of right-of-way agreement between the city and the property owner to continue allowing that business to use a portion of the Michigan Street right-of-way for its parking needs. So lots of moving parts are dependent on the Planning Commission's actions. Finally, another action that would take place after Planning Commission approval, a lot of documents require recording at the Douglas County Register of Deeds, kind of those final wrapping up and then releasing to building permits, folks, releasing to the next step. Slide, please. So just some final items. You can see that with a really responsive applicant and a number of both administrative and commission-based processes, both the minor subdivision and the site plan were completed within a few months, mostly over the summer of 2019. My main takeaway for you all tonight, and I think you all understand this already, is that Planning Commission's role sometimes is just one stop of many on an application's route. It's an important stop, but it's really part of that larger development process. Your recommendation will guide the city and county commissions, and on some items, as you're aware, it can be really, really difficult. But your considerations of land use in our community is really a vital role. So some projects are simpler. They may have a single application, while others, like 508 Michigan, has multiple. These applications are mostly submitted and reviewed concurrently. We really work hard to keep them together. Sometimes that's not possible, but we do our best. Finally, planners are aware that during our presentations and our staff reports, we may speak with a lot of technical jargon, kind of staff talk, and it may seem like we're always talking about how something will be addressed at the site plan, something will be addressed administratively or at that next step. So just know that that's our way of in our mind, we're keeping the ball rolling. We're keeping this application moving down the track as efficiently as possible and in a manner that is compliant with our city's code. So with that, I'll wrap up. Both Denny and I can stand for questions. I hope I've been able to make some of these processes a little bit clearer for you all tonight, and hopefully you have some good questions for us. Oh, and I'll stop screen sharing now.
Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Thank you both very much. Becky, is there anything that needs to be added, or can we just start peppering them with questions?
Becky Pepper, Planning Manager, yes. Feel free, I think now is the time to ask questions if you have them.
Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Any commissioners out there that have any questions that were prompted by the presentation specifically? Shoot away. I see a hand from Commissioner Willie.
Karen Willie, Planning Commissioner. So my question for our excellent staff is, in terms of like the arc of how long it takes to get items through the entire process, how do we compare with other communities in terms of both the result and the outcome, but also just the time frame and how long it takes to get things done?
Luke Mortensen, Planning and Development Services staff. I might punt this one to Jeff just because I actually don't know.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jeff Crick, Planning Director. Commissioner asked a great question, and it usually depends on the complexity and the level of kind of the review steps that you have in code. I give you an idea. One community that I'm very familiar with, their process is very similar to ours, and so it takes, for a normal rezoning, it's not, 3 to 4 months is about a normal process. There are communities out there that would process a rezoning in the time that you would see most Board of Zoning Appeals variances go, which would be 30 days from submittal. They would be going on their way. So it just varies a little bit on the code. There's the two things in our code that really can change the way an application processes is the public notification window that it has, which will vary from application, and then also the appeal window at the end of an application will vary. So some will have a 9-day appeal, some will have a 30-day appeal. So that kind of entry and exit is sometimes the longer of it. But, Some communities, comprehensive plan amendments take a lot longer than ours, truthfully. There's some that are out there that go on for many years before they go through the amendments and things. So it really just depends on what the community sets. But I think in the area, we're pretty close to a lot of our neighbors in a lot of their process steps and timelines. But I'm sure everybody's been changing codes and updating, so I'm sure I'm a little out of date on a couple of the other cities in the area, but more or less, I think we're probably on pretty good footing with them.
Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Commissioner Willie, did you have a follow-up?
I have another question, but I'll save it. And I think Commissioner Ashworth has one.
Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner Ashworth.
Sharon Ashworth, Planning Commissioner. Yes, thank you so much for this presentation. I know it still sometimes seems to me like a big black box where I wonder where things go and come out of. So my question is sort of a two-part question, is what part of the process that you've described from the applicant's perspective, what is the most frustrating part of that? And also what do they appreciate the most about the process you've outlaid here? So I'm asking that from an applicant's perspective and also from the planning staff's perspective. What is it that frustrates you about the process most, or what do you appreciate about the process most?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. I will try to answer from the applicant point of view, but to be fair, I've not submitted an application due to my job as a planner necessarily. I think what they appreciate the most is the pre-application meeting that we have to kind of make sure we get everybody in a room. We try to get as much of that upfront information available. And sometimes we get information out of that meeting that a lot of people don't expect, or, we invite a department that people may not have known that is very important to that application, but they wouldn't have known that department had a role in it. So we usually, the pre-application meeting is the one we tend to hear a lot about it being very popular on that one. And I think the second part of your question was, what do they find the most frustrating, I think was the phrasing to it. If I had to hazard a guess, I would say probably, and any of the other planners can correct me if I'm maybe missing one of them here, but I think sometimes the length of the process is sometimes the trouble to that one. Generally a site planning process, if it comes in, we have 3 levels of site plans. A minor site plan, which is a very small technical change on the site, can take about 3 weeks to go from beginning to end. A standard or a major site plan can usually in the ballpark of about 4 to 6 weeks. Just depends on how fast people resubmit and those things. So we do put applications through a lot of reviews and a lot of checks before they go. So sometimes that process can be a little longer than a lot of people would like. So that would be my hunch on that one. For your half of the question related to what the staff likes about that one, I will turn it to Luke and Becky and Denny and let them chip in, because I think they all probably have a different thing that they like about it, but I will yield the floor.
I'll just add about where I think applicants may be a little frustrated. I think sometimes they're caught off guard on some of the documents and the level of documents that they need to provide. Certain types of studies for our MSO folks related, to fixtures or taps and that kind of thing, or traffic impact studies. I think that sometimes throws people off, and I think sometimes they're also a little confused if a process has changed, or if they're unaware that a text amendment went through and some portion of the code is different from maybe 2 years ago when they submitted something. So I think that's where they get the most, not frustrated, but maybe just confused. As far as my favorite part of our process, we have a lot of great internal systems that are very helpful if you stay on top of it. So we have a great program called Enterprise and a great program called iCompass. And it's how we kind of track all of our communications, all of our projects, and it allows every planner to see the status of a project at any point in time. So if I'm working on a site plan and I'm 3/4 of the way through and a neighbor calls, and for whatever reason they're able to get in contact with Jeff as the planning director, he can go on to our enterprise and he can see where I'm at and answer if he needs to some of those questions. So that is I think the best part, and I'll caveat that requires us planners to really put in the effort to document all of our communications, document, and it's a little bit cumbersome at times, but when you need it, it's great to have.
Becky Pepper, Planning Manager, and I might just follow up and also just share some of my favorites and frustrations. Favorites would be the opportunity that the code provides us for public input, so that there is that notification period for us to get feedback from the public regarding a project, or when applicants have reached out to get that public input from the nearby properties or that neighborhood association that the property might be in. So really working with the community on a project, I would say, is one of my favorite things. And then frustration would be that our land development code is over 500 pages long. And so it is hard to read, it's a very large document. It's not easily accessible, I would say, to the public. And it can be even challenging for planners and staff to really kind of interpret that document. So that'd be a frustration sometimes for me.
Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. I have a question. How often, and this may be not to put anybody on the spot, but how often and at what point do you find the process to become adversarial between the city planning department and the applicant?
Luke Mortensen, Planning and Development Services. In my experience, it has really never been adversarial. People obviously can get frustrated with timelines that may not be what they're thinking they will be. Obviously, with the projects we're doing, there's large sums of money and time and effort involved. So it can be a high stakes environment. I think where it may become the most adversarial in my experience is some of the work we do with floodplains and Board of Zoning Appeal variances. Telling people no sometimes can be difficult, and explaining to them and trying to get them as close to where they want to be is not always a great thing. I think we do a good job with explaining why the answer is no, or explaining why the answer is not exactly what they want to be, and it can get heated or hot, but it's never, in my experience, it's never been adversarial.
Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner, I guess sort of a related follow-up. I think, Denny, you described a point in the process where there are comment letters that go to the applicant. Is that, at what point in that whole process do you eventually, or does the planning department eventually convey to the applicant that, your recommendation is going to be no to the Planning Commission, or it's going to be yes, or yes with a bunch of conditions?
Denny Ewert, Planning Commissioner, Planning and Development Services. I don't know how I want to answer this one.
A lot of times it's when the agenda's published.
Yeah, it's typically you will see the agenda packet the same time that the applicant will receive the staff report. So you're receiving it at the same time that they are receiving. The applicant generally has an idea of what the staff report will say. It's not usually a surprise. The planner will reach out to the applicant and explain why it might be a denial, what conditions might need to be met. So it's not a surprise to the applicant when it's a denial.
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services, if I may, I would say that a lot of times, sometimes applicants have an idea of it when they're starting to see the review comments come up and see some of those letters and some of the different asks that might be coming out of those processes. If there's, certain, like Luke mentioned, traffic studies and things, if we're seeing going from the simple version of a traffic study to the more complex version, that usually applicants know that that's, maybe taking on a little bit of a different tone. But usually, I think a lot of people have an idea of what's occurring as the process is going on, but generally is that first time we let the packet out is when everybody knows where that position stands. And if I may, Commissioner, I would say, you were asking questions about the process being adversarial. I think I always thought of it as more of a very passionate process. People are very committed to the community in a lot of different ways and would like to see certain things happen. So I never took it as an adversarial thing. I always took it as people were very passionate about what they wanted to see Lawrence and Douglas County become in the future. So I've always thought of it more in that line, but that's just my personal take on, I think, the process at that point. But hopefully that helped answer the question.
Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. It did. I appreciate you clarifying my poor description of what could happen. Other questions? Commissioner Willie?
Karen Willie, Planning Commissioner. So we've touched on it a little bit, and this is an unanswerable question, and I recognize that because we have projects of all sizes and scales, but I just kind of want to get a feel for how much money do applicants have on the line by the time it comes to us? Like, what's the cost of a simple traffic study or a complicated traffic study or a drainage study? Some of those pieces and parts, in addition to the site plan that they've also had to pay for. Can you give any insight to that at all?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. We've asked that a couple of times, trying to figure it out along the way there, and it will vary so much from site to site on what's going on, and the context can sometimes drive that more than anything else. And Kyle can correct me. I know he's done a little bit of research on a couple of these here, but some of those traffic studies could be a few $100s, and then they can scale up to be a few $1,000s depending upon what roads they're interfacing, what kind of area they're working around, and those kind of details. One of the studies that the planners know and love is called an H&H, which is a hydraulic and hydrologic study that's done for floodplain, and that can be depending upon the soils and the waterways and the conditions you have on there, that study can be very expensive very quickly. And it's one that our code asks for occasionally, but in very specific instances. So it can vary a little bit there.
I think it's that Luke Mortensen, Planning and Development Services, though the architectural fees, the engineering fees, the surveying fees, we are told often that it is expensive. But in my experience, most people withhold how much they've actually spent. But I would say for a project like this 508 Michigan, for a surveyor to come out and do this work, and you might all be aware of this, could be in over $1,000.
The commissioner asks a very good question, and unfortunately, I don't think we were able to give the answer that we were all probably wanting to have there. So definitely kind of an unanswerable one, and we do appreciate the question.
Sorry, Commissioner Willie, go. Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Commissioner Willie, feel free to proceed with another one.
Karen Willie, Planning Commissioner, just to follow up with that. So thank you for taking a stab at it. I knew it was an unanswerable question, but I want us to have a feel for why it is a high stakes issue by the time an applicant comes to us. It's just, they're probably not in it for less than $10,000. I think maybe by the time they've got site plans, and I mean, even something pretty simple gets expensive quickly, and that's why they get passionate about it when they come to us, and we have other things to say about it.
Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner Willie. Commissioner Ashworth?
Yes, Sharon Ashworth, Planning Commissioner. I'm wondering, when an applicant first contacts the planning staff, I mean, do you all have people with certain levels of expertise? So certain types of projects go to this group of planning staff, and other types of projects go to other people within the planning staff. Are you able to divide it up by various areas of expertise?
So Luke Mortensen, Planning and Development Services, we have what's called Planner of the Day. It's a rotating calendar where most of us are answering phone calls, answering emails. When we were before COVID, we were meeting with walk-in folks to have that first initial contact. And sometimes, if that contact is a general project that maybe doesn't have a specific focus, that planner will follow it kind of through. It may be assigned to him or her. We do have some things, we're more of a generalist office, and I think Jeff would agree, where most of us can do most items, but we do have folks who are definitely specific. So if it's a historic resources item, it would go to Lynn Braddock Zollner. A lot of the floodplain items would either go to myself, with the assistance of Amy Miller. So we do have some of those specific boards and commissions. Those items are generally directed to that planner who is either the liaison or does work with those boards and commissions. So the answer is yes to both. We mostly try to have everybody do a little bit of everything, but we do kind of specialize in some things as well.
And Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director, and if I can kind of piggyback on Luke's comments there, a lot of our planners are actually, when you see them, they're before you in their body as a planner there, but there are some of our staff who actually staff other boards along the way. Kyle Kobe and Lynn Zollner staff our Historic Resources Commission, and they take care of the applications and the processing that goes on for Chapter 22, which is the Conservation of Historic Resources Code for the city. Luke Mortensen and Catherine Week are the staff planners that take care of the Board of Zoning Appeals. So if anything is running in the channels to go through a Board of Zoning Appeals variances, they're working those applications to make sure that they're online in that sense there. But Luke's absolutely right. We have a great team of generalist planners. So we don't, there's not a planner that specifically does just a single type of an application. It's all of our planners will usually touch on an application type throughout the year. So everybody works on subdivisions, everybody works on site planning. We also try to make sure that everybody works on something we call long range, so comprehensive plans, text amendments, those kind of things that might be with us a little bit longer in the department because they have a longer lifespan in the community. But really in the way that the practicing planning world is a generalist planner is you want to make sure it has the same knowledge across the board. So no matter who answers that phone that day or is setting that meeting can get the advice and the details to anybody in the meetings. So we'd always try to make sure we have that kind of practice in the office. And, I always appreciated that as when I was a up and coming planner because that was my chance to find out what application types I liked to work with or what types of things that I liked, and also gave me a chance to get better at the things that I might not have been very good at. So I was always looking for applications where I could kind of learn and grow and keep developing my skills. So that practice was always pretty nice. But Luke is absolutely right. We have an excellent team of generalist planners on staff.
Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Other questions? Commissioner Carpenter, go for it.
Jim Carpenter, Planning Commissioner. I don't know, Denny, Jeff, I guess this is for anybody. But Denny, you ran through the different stages of notice to the public. Could you go back over those and who's responsible for each one of those? Because that often comes up as an issue.
Sure. Denny, you were at Planning and Development Services. Are you talking about the legal requirements, the notification to the public?
Yes.
Okay. So at least 20 days before Planning Commission, the legal notice goes to the newspaper. We mail notification to property owners within 400 feet in the city, and it's a half mile in the county. We get that list from the county clerk's office. It's based on where people have their taxes mailed to, is where they get that address information from. They submit it to us. We mail out the letters. Sign postings are required for city and county projects now. So the applicant picks up the sign from our office. We notify them that it's ready, and the signs get posted at the site 20 days prior to the meeting.
Luke Mortensen, Planning and Development Services. Some applications, the applicant is responsible for sending out notice. For example, certain levels of site planning, so the standard and the major site plan, part of the application is they must submit that letter that they've sent out to the same distance, the 400-foot property ownership.
Jim Carpenter, Planning Commissioner. Thanks for all that. That helps a lot. I guess I have another question. Say there's an application to change the use or whatever it might be that requires one of the sign notices. Is that the only notice that a tenant or somebody that's leasing space would get, since you're mailing notice to property owners? What about people that are actually on the property if it's going to be a change in use on that property?
Denny, you were at Planning and Development Services. So we do have the legal notice in the paper. I realize not a lot of people look at the paper, probably. We also have the subscription list on our website they can sign up for based on topics that they're interested in, so they can receive notification of packets that have been posted for Planning Commission, City Commission. There's a variety of topics they can sign up for on our website to be notified. So if they want to be involved, they do have to make a little bit of effort. They could get involved with their neighborhood association, which also receives notification. But in terms of the letter going to the property owner versus somebody who's leased, yeah, we would rely on the property owner to give that notification to the occupant.
Jim Carpenter, Planning Commissioner, thank you very much.
Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Commissioner Ashworth, I just have a follow-up on that, if that's okay. Denny or Jeff, Becky, Luke, is there a mechanism to require property owners to notify their tenants of a planning application or submittal?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. Commissioner, I've not run across a code that required that, but I mean, theoretically it could go that route if that was what the code had asked of itself. Typically, it's the tenants and the property owners usually have that contract between them on how those kind of things are handled and processed in that one. But off the top of my head, I've not run across a code that actually noticed the tenants on that then versus the landowner.
Okay. Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Commissioner Ashworth, did you want to proceed with your question?
Yes, I'm also piggybacking on, this is Sharon Ashworth, Planning Commissioner, off of Commissioner Carpenter's comment. We often have people at the commission meetings commenting, the general public coming to comment, and they may not have been within that radius. What is the one thing you wish that the commenting public would know about the planning process? These are the people who have not been notified, but may be following along to some extent because they've heard about a project. Is there a piece of the planning process that you wish they were most informed about?
Luke Mortensen, Planning and Development Services staff. I think calling or emailing a formal comment is very helpful, and I think it does sway opinions sometimes. Speaking for the Board of Zoning Appeals, when folks do submit a comment of support or opposition, that does get included in the staff report. Not their name and address, but we will note how many neighbors were in opposition or support, and neighbors could be outside of that 400 foot. We do include that. So I think submitting a formal opposition or support is worthwhile, and I wish people knew that.
Thank you.
Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Commissioner Struckoff.
Following back on the notification procedures, you don't have to, having filled out a few of these for some recent site plans that we've done in East Lawrence and downtown, there is no requirement to notify the tenants of the buildings within 400 feet. But the process is actually made pretty easy by the county clerk. It's a very streamlined process. basically you send them the address that you're working at, and they turn around, and I usually get these back within an hour or two of a list of every property and the owners and the mailing addresses of those owners in a simple spreadsheet file, which I can then turn around and send to a printer like Minuteman, for instance, and say, here's a spreadsheet, here's the letter. I'd like these put in an envelope, stamped, mailed, and that can be taken care of pretty quickly. It's a very streamlined process. And then to me, it's always been, if you're a tenant in the area of a project, that's what the yellow sign is for. If that helps everybody within that area who might not be the owner but will be in the region of the project, be aware that there's a change going on and there's a project in process, and here's what you can do to find out more about it. So the process from a developer standpoint is pretty straightforward, and seems to work pretty well. It's quite streamlined.
Thank you, Commissioner Struckoff. Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Other questions? I have another one I could pose. On several occasions, I think we've had a few applications, I think, arise where we've been pleasantly surprised that the applicant has sort of gone above and beyond with meeting with the neighborhood, sometimes on more than one occasion. And I think it's come up maybe that those have been suggestions, or perhaps the planning staff will make that recommendation or a little suggestion to an applicant that it may help if that happens. And I'm curious, is that something that you all recommend as a matter of course, or is it, if it seems like one that may have some hair when it comes in front of the commission, maybe they ought to consider it?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. Typically, most times the planners will advise that, you should at least speak to the neighborhood association if some projects might not rise to the need of a meeting, but at least to talk with the neighborhood associations if there's one registered, or if it is, have the meeting to kind of have those items in there. Usually we find that by the time that they've come to us, a lot of applicants have already done that. So it's by the time they've reached us, they're telling us they've had the meeting or they've got it on the books. So it's sometimes we're not even the first time they're hearing that in many instances. But we do try to make sure, and part of the mailed notice goes to registered neighborhood associations by code. So when we do that notice that goes out, it goes to the 400 feet and the registered neighborhood association. So they would get the same mailing letter if they're a registered item. But typically we find that it's kind of, a lot of people do that just as a matter of course, even before they even talk to us, is to have that in the works and ready to go. So it's very nice when that does happen.
Luke Mortensen, PDS. I'll just add on top of that, some neighborhood organizations are really involved and really engaged and have like a point person or somebody who can offer comments on behalf of that formal organization. That can be really helpful. I have on a number of occasions given a applicant or a potential applicant that contact information and put those two people together to begin communication. So that is really helpful for us. Unfortunately, not all neighborhoods have an active neighborhood organization, and if they do, it may not be very. They may not always be communicating with us. When we send out that contact information that Jeff was talking about, we rely on the neighborhood organizations to provide their most accurate contact information. So it's helpful when everybody is on top of things.
And Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director, just for the commission's knowledge, Section 20-1301 of the Land Development Code outlines the summary of procedures that we follow based upon the application types for the city. The county code has a very similar table to this. I think it actually goes by the same name, the summary of procedures, and it outlines the types of notice, the reviewing entities, the decision-making bodies, and the details related to those processes. So if you have any questions about of a city or a county application, who's the decision maker and what was the what was the notice that was applied to those. Both codes have that table, so you can look at it and find out what those process steps were that the applications and the staff has been guided by. So in the city's code, I just happen to have it on my screen here, it's 1301. The county code has a very similar table in there called the Summary of Procedures table.
Thank you so much. Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Do we have other questions from the Commission? It doesn't seem like we do. I really appreciate you guys preparing for this. Luke and Denny, thank you so much. I think it's extremely helpful to be reminded of the backstory and some of the things that we may not consider, and sometimes we can, I think, lose the forest for the trees. I do know on our agenda here, there's a miscellaneous new or old business item, and I didn't know if we needed to go to that or if it'd be appropriate to ask, well, I was going to ask, open up for public comment now before we get to that, or do that first? So I guess it's kind of a point of order, Jeff.
Jeff Craig, Planning and Development Services Director. Give me 1 second to get back to my agenda, which I have conveniently somehow lost. Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. Commissioner Sinclair, I think public comment would be fitting at the moment, given the other item on the agenda.
Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Thanks, Jeff. Unless there's anyone in the room that's arrived since early on, I think I see one member of the public here. I see Mr. Allman on the line with a hand raised. Mr. Allman, feel free to proceed. And I think we are abiding by the 3-minute rule for commenters, but feel free to go.
All right, good evening. Thank you. My name is Michael Allman, and I'm speaking for myself tonight. Well, it's apparent that the whole review process is extremely complex. I don't think anybody is surprised by that, considering 500 plus pages of development code and how long it takes. I was impressed, though, hearing to what extent staff, what lengths staff goes to when handling the process, saying things like they want to make sure that the applicant has the most knowledge of the process as possible. They want to learn exactly what the applicant wants. Have all the reviewers opportunity to talk directly with the applicant, working through a lot of the steps with a lot of diligence, and it's very admirable, and we appreciate that they're doing their job so thoroughly. It strikes me, however, that this review process is extremely asymmetrical. And why I say that is because as somebody who's interested in the process for various projects or processes, I'm painfully aware that for all the discussion goes on for, a good 12 weeks or so, as they described. When the public learns about any of the details, and it's not all the details, it's 5 days before the meeting. I mean, that is probably the heart of the problem. It's not the notification thing, although there's definitely problems with notification. It's come up many, many times. It's a sore point. You talked about it at length tonight. You know it's a problem. But the time by which the public learns about something is really the problem. And this doesn't apply necessarily to everything, but some items, there is no public notice when it's an administrative decision. But there are other items such as a preliminary development plan or a preliminary plat or whatever. That's something that isn't a 400-foot notification, but a lot of people in the community would want to know about those things. I think it might be worth considering, and this is, taking it to a higher level, might be worth considering that if there is some project, particularly within a neighborhood, and neighborhood associations are not always notified of every project, by the way, but if there is some project within a certain neighborhood, maybe the neighborhood can be notified at the time that the reviewers are notified, some 3, 4, or 5 weeks before it reaches the Planning Commission. So the neighborhood is in the process earlier on, maybe not with the same level of authority, but at least to know about the process, know what is being proposed, and know what to prepare for, because 5 days to prepare for some of these things is entirely inadequate. Other than that, I'm just concerned that the list of what kinds of projects or processes get notification, some to adjoining property owners, some not at all, some not to the neighborhood associations, some are. It's a very hodgepodge process, and we are often blindsided. And it's not unusual that other neighborhoods have complained the same way. I think there has to be a lot of study of how this needs to be corrected, to improved upon, and made much more accessible to the public. I sure appreciate your time, and I appreciate this whole discussion. I'm glad it's finally been discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allman. I really appreciate your comments. Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. I guess, Jeff, I would just direct a question your way. How often are the public notice requirements in the planning process or in the code talked about or sort of reviewed for propriety, I guess?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. The processes have come up in the last couple of years, probably about 4 or 5 years ago at this point now. City Commission actually expanded the notice radius from 200 feet to 400 feet and did a study about what that looked like and what the cost and the noticing was. I believe it to be about 5 years ago now, actually, now I'm stopping to think about it. So it is something that the commission has taken a look at and done the details to. And Mr. Allman made a comment that sparked a memory for me that I failed to mention during our discussion earlier. On the Planning and Development Services website is actually an online list and a map, so you can see all of the applications that have been submitted to the office and a map of where they're at, and it's updated, I believe every week. I have to believe it's Monday night or Sunday night. So you can see every type of application that has been submitted to the office, all the way down to what we call a zoning certification, which is somebody asking for a written zoning check to see what the property can be used for, all the way up to text amendments and comprehensive plan amendments. They all show up in the list there. So it's updated weekly, and it does have I call it a register. It looks like a running Excel spreadsheet online that you can look up and see who the planner is, when the application was submitted, and what the property is, or what the kind of the name of the property is for. And then there's also the map that shows where it is graphically, and you can click on that, and it will pull up the application and drawing if they're available online. We're still trying to get more of those online features activated. We're just haven't had much luck on getting it quite advanced as much as we have, but we're looking to get that better over time.
Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Thank you, Jeff. In light of Mr. Allman's comments, are there any planning commissioners that had any thoughts they wanted to add before we move on to the next step or next item on the agenda? Seeing none, I guess, Jeff, can I turn it back to you for the miscellaneous or new or old business?
Jeff Crick, Planning Development Services Director, be happy to. At this time, staff is not aware of any that relate to the mid-month. So we'll be kind of just keeping an eye on that one, but that is all we had for this evening.
Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Thanks, Jeff. One last chance. Any commissioners want to say anything while we're all here together before Wednesday?
Just thank you for the presentation. Thank you very much.
And will this be available, the PowerPoint presentation? Will you send that out or make it available to the public?
Denny, you were at Planning and Development Services. It is posted to the website. It got posted right before the meeting. So it's a link on the packet.
All right, well, that explains why I didn't see it yet.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Well, yeah, thank you all very much. Thank you, staff, for the really interesting presentation. And I think I can myself make a motion to recess now. And so I move that we recess. Do we have a second? Commissioner Struckoff seconded the motion. I guess Kyle, or would it be Kyle or would it be Jeff that would call the roll?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services. I'd be happy to call the roll. I'll call it based on the screen just in case. Here, Commissioner Shanklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Willie?
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Ashworth?
Yes.
Commissioner Payton?
Yes.
Commissioner Struckoff?
Yes.
Motion passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-0.
Commissioner Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Thank you, Jeff. I guess then we're recessed until Wednesday night at 6:30.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.